እየተከታተላችሁ ያላችሁት የአዲስ ቅኝትን የሚዲያ አገልግሎት ነው። እኛ ነፃ የሐሳብ ልውውጥ እንዲኖር ከመገፋፋት መሳሳብ፣ ከመራራቅ መቀራረብ እንዲፈጠር ጠንክረን እንሰራለን። እናንተ ላይክ፣ ሼር እና ሰብስክራይብ በማድረግ የማህበረሰብ ሚዲያ አጋርነታችሁን አረጋግጡ። አዲስ ቅኝት የሚዲያ አገልግሎት።
The countryside holds me, but the city calls me. Some thoughts about rural isolation during the time of COVID-19. It might be interesting to talk about how someone living in a rural setting outside the city is coping with the conditions and the social isolation that have been brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm happy to talk about my situation, but to do that, I'll have to give you some background about this place where I live. I live in a country farmhouse that is out in the country, north and east of Toronto. This is farmland. The nearest town is about 10 kilometers away. It takes us about 15 minutes to drive there. There are no streets here, no buses, no stores, no coffee shops. I cannot even see the houses of my two nearest neighbors. This is a house that was built when the land in this area was first settled and used for farming by European settlers. Long before the European people settled here, this area was the home of native people who hunted and farmed here. But this house, built in two stages, in 1820 and in 1875, reflects European culture and farming practices, with a North American flavor. The house where I live was the residence of the farming family that worked the 97-acre farm here. It has 4 bedrooms, a wood stove for heating the house in the winter, and a well for our water. Originally, the farm families that lived here would have had a working farm. They would have been virtually self-sufficient. They would have raised their own animals for meat, milk, butter, and eggs. And they would have grown most of their own food. There is a big wooden barn beside the house where the annual crop of hay was kept, and where the dairy and meat cattle were kept and fed over the winter. This property ceased to be used as a farm about 50 years ago, around the time when farming in Canada stopped being operated predominantly by families, which is to say, about the time that farming became big business. It was also the time that the city of Toronto had grown so large and the highway network had become so extensive that people could live here, hold jobs in the city, and commute to work there instead of surviving here by farming. And that's what I ended up doing. I moved here when this land was expropriated by the federal government, so it could be used for an airport, a future second international airport for Toronto. When I first rented this old house, I thought I'd be living here for just a few years before the construction of the airport would begin, and that was what the government thought as well. But the airport was never built, and so the land has not been developed, and it continues to be used as farmland. And of course, I'm still living here. But the federal government, my landlord, does the minimum amount of maintenance on the house and no work on the land around the house. That is up to me. That's the background. Now here are some of the thoughts I have had while living here and adjusting to staying at home because of the pandemic. I am spending a huge amount of time working around the property here, more than I ever used to. I cut down dead trees and clean up all the branches and debris that fell over the winter. I prepare the soil for our large vegetable garden. I take off the wooden storm windows and put on screens in preparation for the warm weather of spring that will eventually come this year, weather that I await with greater than normal impatience. I keep the wood stove burning in order to keep the house warm. lighting it every morning, bringing wood into the house ready to burn, cleaning the ashes out a few times a week. These are just some of the tasks that come with living in this old, poorly insulated wooden house. They are the tasks that are the regular, essential, often daily routines that come with living this lifestyle. And because I'm a partially liberated man, I also clean the house, I wash dishes, I clean the kitchen and do some of the cooking. I had to add that part. There are some lessons in this. I am learning what it must have been like to live here 120 years ago, when people worked on the land, worked in the house, worked on the house and the outbuildings, worked on the fences, and worked with the animals all day, every day, and never got away and never saw anybody else except on Sundays when they went to the community church, about an hour's ride in a horse-drawn wagon. Evenings would have involved reading the Bible, doing handwork like preserving food, knitting, making baskets, repairing tools, and clothing. Evenings would have been pretty quiet. No electric lights, no radios, no televisions, no computers, no internet. Now, we would find them boring. I can see what a joyful experience it would have been to see and to have time with other people once a week at the church. This time, at least for the women, would have been essentially their only connection to the community. The men probably went into town once a week or so to go to the market and to shop, maybe once a month, but the women got to do this less often. The social isolation that we are now feeling was a regular feature of the lives of people who lived here years ago. One can see how they must have felt the pull of the city. In comparison, it would be so stimulating, so many social options, and so different. That pull of the city, that's what I'm feeling now. I want to go to the city. I want to walk in the streets. I want to meet people and to see friends. A movie, some music, maybe a meal out, someone else's cooking. How wonderful all these things would be. It helps me to endure the current social isolation when I remember that the people who lived here before me for generations were permanently socially isolated, and that despite this, they lived good lives. I guess I'll just have to do the work of adjusting to our new normal. Death, the great equalizer? But is it? No, it's not. Corona time. This is a time of death, a time when death has been in the news, in our minds and in our hearts, and if we are among the unlucky ones, in our bodies. COVID-19 is taking some of us. We, if not individually, then collectively, have been dying. But who among us is dying? Is death reaping an equal harvest? A random harvest from among the young and the old and the well and the infirm, the advantaged and the disadvantaged, and the rich and the poor? I think not. Who are the thousands that have been dying in New York City? It's not their names, but their circumstances that have to be examined. Did you think that it is the wealthy and healthy, the white upper class, that is being thinned out? Or is it the poor, the non-white, the disadvantaged that are dying? Surely we must examine the demographic of death's abundant harvest in New York. I would be willing to bet that those whose bodies are now being buried in mass graves, because they have no means to pay the costs of their own funeral, because they have no family to step up for them. It's those who are predominantly not white, not wealthy, and not lucky. Those who were not given a chance, those who were not valued. So who is going to pay the price of this coronavirus pandemic? Is it all of us? Equally? Is it those whose shares in the corporations of the healthcare sector that operate on a just-in-time supply basis, maintaining no reserves of emergency medical supplies because such a practice would cost more? Or is it the citizen who, because she or he has no health insurance, now needs such supplies when life deals him or her more shit than it already has, when the game of free enterprise has provided to shareholders the profits of privatized healthcare and not provided to the common man the benefits of medical care? There's a fake question here, isn't there, in what I'm asking? There is no question. The loser is the common citizen who pays with his life for the enhanced profit margins of the healthcare corporations, the corporations that first serve their shareholders and not the patients whose lives now depend on their products. Oh, but you might say, that's in the US. That's not here in Canada. Do you think that Canadians don't pay unequally for this pandemic, and some with their lives? Why were there no emergency supplies of medical masks available in Canada before the pandemic hit its current levels? It's simple. It was reliance on a just-in-time supply. There just weren't the number of masks or ventilators or ICU beds, because keeping a reasonable supply of such things we all need in times like these, would be too expensive. This is a false economy. Now look at the cost that we're paying. And you might say, we have a universally accessible public health care system in Canada. It works well. Does it? You know, don't you, that employers, including hospitals, health clinics, retirement homes, and long-term care facilities, don't have to pay their part-time employees any employment benefits. They're not required by law to do this. But why don't they do it when obviously such benefits are essential for the well-being of the family of any wage earner? It's because, the government has been told, it costs too much. And what is the result of this policy and practice? It is this. Caregivers are routinely hired only on a part-time basis. So their employers can save the costs of employment benefits that are mandatory for full-time employees. These workers routinely have to work 2 or 3 part-time jobs in order to earn enough to live and to support their families. You might think, unless you are one of those workers, oh, that's their problem, not mine. But you would be wrong. Part-time workers traveling between health facilities to do their part-time jobs have been carrying COVID-19 infection between their work sites. Of course they do. COVID-19 is highly infectious and easily transmissible. But aren't these essential workers? They are critically needed right now, wherever they work. We should never lose sight of the fact that the majority of them would not transmit disease between locations if they could only work in one location. That is, if they could. But they can't, because employers don't structure their positions as full-time jobs. And they do this, the employers, to save themselves money. And they do it because they're allowed to. So who pays the price for this? Who pays now for the unjust employment practice that deprives essential workers, the ones we're now calling heroes? It deprives them of full-time work and employment benefits. We do. We pay the price. You do. It's your aged mother or your unwell father who is in care, or it's your brother or your grandmother. It's you who is paying that price right now. So I ask you, why are you putting up with this? And if frontline workers are our heroes, why are we allowing them to be victimized? Death in COVID-19 Canada is not the great equalizer. Those who are disadvantaged, those who are most vulnerable, those who right now have the greatest need, those who face the greatest challenges, these are the people who are paying the highest costs. They are paying with their lives.
እየተከታተላችሁ ያላችሁት የአዲስ ቅኝትን የሚዲያ አገልግሎት ነው። እኛ ነፃ የሐሳብ ልውውጥ እንዲኖር ከመገፋፋት መሳሳብ ከመራራቅ መቀራረብ እንዲፈጠር ጠንክረን እንሰራለን። እናንተ ላይክ፣ ሼር እና ሰብስክራይብ በማድረግ የማህበረሰብ ሚዲያ አጋርነታችሁን አረጋግጡ። አዲስ ቅኝት የሚዲያ አገልግሎት